Hello and welcome to the first episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights for 2026. And I had to think about that. You might have noticed a slight pause there that I had to really think about the fact that it is 2026 now. So as usual, we are focusing this episode on Microsoft Cloud and related news items, and we come out bi-weekly. So, without further ado, we are going to kick off with a range of subjects from both David and Cyrus, and probably a slight rant from me, as usual. David is going to talk about an acquisition that Microsoft did for a company called Osmos, reflecting on design responsibility, which was inspired by a LinkedIn article from Ida Person, and core skills for 2030, which was from an article by Fabio Moily, if I've correctly pronounced his name. Apologies if I haven't.
Cyrus wants to... No, I would have done, Richard.
Sometimes I don't know whether there's a tool that actually tells you how to pronounce people's names. But anyway, we'll figure that one out. And Cyrus, I think, has got some news on his views on Intune and Purview. So without further ado, which I've now repeated, which just shows how out of practice I am for doing this because we haven't recorded for about 4 weeks, I will pass across to David, I think, to kick us off with one of his subjects that he wants to do.
Thank you very much, Richard. Yeah, I want to start with this acquisition that I guess on the surface, you could say it looks like one of those fairly standard announcements, but the more I think about it, I think the more I think about it, it says something quite important about where I think platforms and I guess work in general are going, right? So they've announced this acquisition of Osmos, and it's being positioned as a way to accelerate, I'm going to get the word right, autonomous data engineering inside Microsoft Fabric, which sounds super interesting. And obviously the headline itself isn't the interesting thing. I think what's interesting is what they're trying to attack, trying to make it go away, because I suppose if we're honest, data engineering is still where progress, I guess, slows down when you're trying to do these AI things. Like the ingestion of that data piece is always the slower element of that. And even I'll talk briefly about my wife. She's a physiotherapist, and she's been trying to create quite very simple things, right, of sort of improvement of people before and after they've come in for the thing that they come in for. And like she's got these spreadsheets, and they've got 2 columns at the top for the header. Right? We all know that doesn't work when you try doing pie charts, and then the data's all mushed and munged. And she spent ages trying to fix that. And when you extrapolate that up to the people that really do know what they're doing, the thing that slows it down is much of this work is, I guess, repetitive. It's brittle and almost never done, right? And we see this, I'm sure you've seen it, we see it over and over and over in every organization. You've got a new data source appears, messy, schemas don't line up, and then somebody builds a pipeline, it works, and then something changes and it all breaks, right? So I think it really strikes me how much human effort goes into the first mile of data, for want of a better phrase. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there are people out there that love it, but I think it is the least interesting. Is it the least valuable? I don't know. It's certainly least interesting for people because it's a tedious job to be trying to work this stuff out. I would argue it's valuable, but it valuable in terms of the outcome, but not valuable in terms of time spent, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? And that I think from reading the announcement is what Osmos goes after. So it's not it's not a co-pilot that sort of suggests code, and it's not an agent, right? So you sit there, ask it to do something, comes back, waits for approval. It's actually built around a agentic AI platform that then actually acts. So it ingests raw data, it will infer structure, it will create sort of Spark pipelines, and then have the ability to adapt when the data changes, which again is super interesting. And then if you look at the forward-looking view, so when Microsoft talk about bringing that into Fabric, I don't think the ambition here is to make data engineers slightly faster. I think the ambition is stop humans doing this kind of work at all. And at that point, then it sort of becomes a bit interesting, because we know that Fabric already sits on top of one leg, right? So the single unified data foundation stuff. And I think what Osmos brings is beginnings of something that's a bit more autonomous, that sits on top of that foundation. And, I think still this isn't about replacing data engineers, because that's low value work. I think for data engineers, it's just, again, and this is the whole AI narrative, I know, and we keep banging on about it, but it's about changing what they spend their time on, right? And to be able to look at spending less time on writing and chasing sort of schema drift and fixing pipelines and all that stuff, right? It's more time about being able to think about outcomes and setting constraints and guardrails and all the things that actually matter for folk in organizations. And it helps move people up the stack. So I thought that was super interesting, and probably a pattern that we see more broadly. We see people stepping in, like you, Richard, me, Cyrus, we've all been coding. With the exception of Cyrus, I wouldn't say that we're all developers. And is the code we produce good? No idea. Probably not. But we're still able to do it where 6 months, a year ago, we just would have been able to do it. So I think that was super interesting, and I think it leads me fairly nicely into the second thing I spoke about, which is the article that I saw. Nothing to do with Microsoft, but it sort of prompted a bit of reflection, as Richard said. And the article, I guess, challenges the classic design prompt, i.e., how might we do this thing? And it flips it almost. And now it says, okay, well, assuming you probably do the thing, at what cost do you, at what cost in doing the thing? And I think it's a nice shift. And I guess if you look at it at a security perspective, it's like the trust but verify thing. You want to understand what's going on, and how might we, as a construct, is brilliant for unlocking ideas. Right, it sort of removes those constraints people have in the day to day. It sort of encourages exploration. But when you combine that with systems that can now act autonomously. I keep getting that. It's such a hard word for me. I don't know why. The question then on its own becomes incomplete, because how can I suddenly results in a fully functioning thing? And what we need now is that counterbalance that says, how can I, but at what cost? Because otherwise you wind up with these things going off and building a ream of things with no consideration for the flip side of that conversation. And you could, if you don't, there's this cost potentially trust, depending what you do. You've got the cost to users, because they've not accounted for some really super important results of the thing being created. So I think it's probably something we need to get more comfortable talking about. And it's not a dramatic thing, right? It's not about inducing fear and FUD and all that stuff, right? It's just, dare I say, a grown-up way of having the conversation. And I think that leads me onto the last one, which was sort of indirect. But I thought it was interesting. There was another post that was referencing the World Economic Forum data on skills that will matter most for leaders by 2030. And it was interesting. It was kind of a balance between human skills, empathy, creativity, developing people, analytical thinking, all that stuff. And then not being a technologist, but understanding technology well enough to make good decisions about it. And I think as architects, we sometimes fall into the trap that we have to know the nth degree about the technology, but actually it's more important that we as architects ensure that people make good decisions, right? And sometimes we have to let the implementation, the technology bit, and we have to let go of that sometimes, and that's quite a hard thing, especially with all the agents that are available. It feels like the reverse is happening. We're making these decisions and then doing it, and we're making the decisions and then doing it because you can. And like back to the previous conversation, should we? So I think that was, those are the things I was going to talk about. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, and I think that the point you just made is really quite relevant, because at the moment, and I've fallen, I don't know whether I've fallen into this trap, but I'm certainly in a position now where someone says to me, "Oh, this is a really interesting thing," and I go, "Okay, GitHub Copilot, whatever it might well be," and I have a MVP within, yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I should say this or not, but anyway, we've got we're part of a private preview at the moment at IBM. I'm not going to say what that private preview is, but instead of me sitting there reading all the documentation, which I should have done, and I will go and sit and read the documentation so I understand what it's doing, is I basically download the documentation, stuck it into Copilot, and said, "Wait, build me a proof of concept, or build me something that demonstrates this technology." And yeah, half an hour later, whatever it was, I had a simple application that actually went through and gave me something that was demonstrable.
Yeah.
Against that private preview that we've been assigned to, and it's coming up this is coming constantly. We're responding to a Gartner RFP at the moment, and I think, must admit, these Gartner RFIs and Forrester RFIs are going to become meaningless soon.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if anybody's listening that's gone through these, but typically there's like 3 or 4 different sections. The client interviews, probably pick up the sort of main bit, but then there's a whole like RFP that you go through with like 50 questions saying, explain how you do X, what value do you bring with Y, et cetera, et cetera. All of those you could just now feed into a dedicated agent that's looking to give you top marks for all of those responses. It'll also spin out the briefing deck at the end, which is the one you have to go through and present to the analysts when they come through to it. And I'm just thinking, hang on a second, these things now are almost pointless. But it's come to the point where you can just sit there and work with an agent and say, right, I've got this problem, help me solve it.
Yeah.
You have to understand what the problem is. You also have to understand vaguely what the steps are that the AI agent is going to do to come to a solution. And you probably still have to understand how to use that solution, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But it's becoming really, really easy to just spin this stuff up all the time. So the question is, should we?
Yes.
What is the cost, as you mentioned? And I don't think that's necessarily a financial cost. That's also a cost to other elements as well. I don't know, moral cost or whatever it might well be as well, thinking about it. But it's just so easy for people. So there has to be a way of looking at that in the future about what that really means. I don't know. A slight tangent, I think, is not quite the question you were asking, but that's where it went in my head.
No, I mean, it is absolutely a relevant conversation to have in that context, Richard. Completely agree. And when you think back to days gone by, because we're old now. Anyway, well, talking for myself. Those sort of MVP proof of concept things would be how junior people would cut their teeth and learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
How you have to be super intentional about going, I can do this, but actually there's somebody over there that needs the experience more than I do. And I think leaders fall into a trap, especially when everything's so accessible now, of, well, I can just do it in less time, right? And that's always been an issue. You can always, that voice is always in the back of your mind, you know, but throughout your career, you know, you can think of, well, I could have done that quicker, but it's not about you doing it quicker. It's about the people gaining the right experience so that, you know, and the virtual cycle continues. And it feels, I think I just worry a bit. I'm getting a bit more pessimistic as time's going on.
And I think I've mentioned this in the pod before. If I look at my career path when I was coming out of college, because unlike I think probably both of you, I didn't actually go to university. I went later on, but I didn't go straight out of college. Is that entry path that I took on, which was sort of like first level, you know, support, development support, that is almost gone.
Yeah.
Because that's where, you know, if you look at some of the things from Ignite, that's what GitHub is targeting. That, hey, I've got a bug, and it's a simple bug. GitHub will go and, you know, automatically create the fix, deploy it, and you don't need that sort of entry level person anymore. So I think that the generation that is now in sort of college, university, and possibly doing, you know, we're in the UK, so GCSEs perhaps, really probably have to think about what they are going to be doing. And some careers are probably completely messed up for the entry level roles. I'm thinking sort of some of the creative industries. Entry level roles must be really difficult now in those places to get through.
Yeah, it's tough. Oh, thank you.
Cyrus, any thoughts from you before I have a quick diatribe? Basically, actually based off what David just said, which is serendipitous, because as everybody knows, we never plan this, so we don't actually know what anybody's going to be talking about until about 5 minutes before the recording starts. But Cyrus, any thoughts from you on that David's topics? You're on mute.
Sorry. No, I was saying that your comments, Richard, made me think a lot about what we discussed a few episodes ago about entry level career. For example, initial developers, technicians, those on at risk and completely. Yeah, there's a more discussion we can have. I don't want to digress too much into that, but it's a long discussion. We should do probably an episode about what we envision for these youth that will go in the professional market, because that's one of the questions I receive sometimes from LinkedIn mentorship. So, you know, like when we have a lot of people even changing career, for example, people of my age saying that, you know what, I've done that for like 10 years. I heard IT is like a gold mine. Can I just change and do this and that? Security, AI developers, but a lot of things changed from the last month and from the last year. It's just it's not a fatality. It's just like you have to, you know, like as David explained, how to use AI relevantly and just relearn constantly. It's a different mindset. Some people like it. Some people want something to learn and do it their whole life. I just digress 1 second. It's just like I saw my uncle recently. Probably we'll see that episode, and he is a Cisco expert for like 43 years, and he keeps telling me since I'm a child. He said that to me. He said, if you want something laid back and that doesn't change, and you know it will not change for the next 50 years, learn Cisco, become a CCSP, CCSE. So he said, if you do that, you will do the same thing for the rest of your life. Sounds boring for some, or sounds like, you know, like secure. And I'm surprised that even today, he retired, they keep calling him for training, for teaching the new generation. I'm like, and I asked him, is AI going to change you? He said, yeah, we implemented AI. You have more, you can have like a prompt to detect more things in a network or design things. But long story short, you still need people that are fully hands-on to go to hospital, to airports, to even places like when they need people to know what they're doing. So it's, sorry, I digressed too much. I didn't want to go to that digression
No,
loop.
that's okay. I mean, it's certainly worth a deeper conversation. And I know that lots of people are having this conversation about what is the future of work? What does that look like? What skills do the youngsters coming through today need? What do the people like us, but other people, what do we need to retrain in? What do we need to consider as additional skills in our toolbox, so to speak? So I think it's an important one. Now, it does depend on the AI bubble. Now, whether this is just a bubble and it's all going to go away in a couple of years when they realise that it's not quite mature enough to do what everybody wants it to do, perhaps. But we'll see, which I think brings me nicely, or possibly not nicely, onto what I wanted to talk about, which was actually that I'm now being inundated with AI agents. I mean, I can't do anything now without having some AI agent talk to me about something or other. And I know that this is, if you listen to what Satya has been saying, what Judson has been saying as well around sort of the way that Windows is going to be going, the way that Microsoft is going to be going. So it's going to become this sort of AI. I'm not sure what to call it. It's like a marketplace. It's not even going to be the sort of tools and agents themselves, perhaps. It's going to be the enablement to do that. So you're going to end up with agents running around doing everything. And if you look at Copilot at the moment, I mean, okay, it started off as an individual sort of app. Now you've got it in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, GitHub, every single place you can think of. Yet there's still a little bit disconnected, I think. I don't know whether that's your experience as well. It'll be really nice if you could be in, say, the Excel Copilot and be saying, okay, right, I've got this data here, then pop over into Word and then go to Word and say, okay, right, the Excel data that I've just been working on, can you stick that into a table here, write some paragraphs around it and do anything else? I don't think it's quite there yet, because you can sort of you can copy and paste between, you can attach documents and stuff like that, but it's not quite having that shared context between. So we're still in that little disparate piece where these bits all over the place. On David?
I was going to say, and I think that's the thing that I keep forgetting the name of, Fabric IQ, whatever, not Fabric IQ, Copilot, which one was it? Work IQ.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to do that with that, because it brings that layer in line, doesn't it? But the continuity across the agents, I think you're absolutely spot on, right? Because the conversation is a disparate conversation if the data's still there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I'm sort of struggling at the moment. So there's some agents that I use quite extensively. So the M365 standalone app I use quite a lot. I'm using obviously GitHub Copilot quite a bit at the moment, but Word and Excel less so, because I find that it doesn't quite have the same level of context, I suppose. And I had this problem because you know that the M365 Copilot at least has a work and a web mode.
Yeah.
Now, what I hadn't realized about that was that the context it uses seems to be subtly different. So I put a query in the work mode, and it, as it probably is designed to do, focused purely on work content. So looked at emails, chats, everything else, but seemed to ignore the stuff that I do outside of work. So the podcast, the newsletter, the blog site, all that sort of stuff. So it didn't have the full picture. So I thought it was just very weird that happened. I don't know whether it was just me, whether it was just an example that was perhaps not the best use case for this. But there you go. So
yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the guardrails, you kind of have work guardrails versus work content guardrails.
Yeah.
And the web thing. And I suppose the intent is, internal, external. But so much of what we do bridges the two, right? And you're right, it creates a bit of a...
Yeah, and it was weird that I would expect there to be differences in the responses, because the web one should, in theory, ignore the stuff that's in SharePoint, OneDrive, etc.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect it to be quite so different in some of the things that perhaps I thought would cross over. So that was interesting, and I think that when you get agents coming in, so we people that know we work at IBM, we use Slack and Teams. So there's an agent in Slack now. There's an agent in Salesforce, which we also use. There's an agent in every single application, but they're still sort of dotted around, and it can be so frustrating. But anyway, that was my sort of rant and diatribe around that. I did want to actually bring up one point, which someone reminded me about the other day. So I don't know if anybody saw one of the LinkedIn posts I put up just before Christmas. But I was developing something. GitHub Copilot was developing something on my behalf. And it managed to delete a resource group again. So this is now the second time this has happened to me. You guys know about it because I posted the chat in our internal Slack piece. My fault. Well, not really my fault, but again, this comes down to how you're creating the prompts and how you're managing. And I was talking to a colleague of ours, and he reminded me of a really good feature for this in Azure. So I thought I would share that out in case anybody else out there had forgotten this feature, like I had completely forgotten about this feature, which is locks. You can lock things in Azure so that you can't delete them. So now, almost the first thing I do is, at a minimum, go and put a lock on the resource group that I'm working on, so that GitHub Copilot can't accidentally go and delete it. So there you go. Anybody that's listening out there that is as daft as me and has forgotten that you can do that, if you're working with any agent against Azure, or I don't know whether the feature exists in AWS or GCP, I'm sure there must be something similar. Have a look and see what you can do around locking your resources so that you can't accidentally delete them. Anyway, I'm hoping that might provide some value to somebody that might be listening to this one. And I got it to, and it still managed to do something yesterday with GitHub repo, which I will think of how I can actually track that and get that more secure as well. So it managed to lose a branch. I still don't understand how it managed to do this, but once I found out, I will share that with everybody here as well. Anyway, that's enough from me and my annoyance, for want of a better word, with the multitude of agents we've got, and they don't actually share context between each other. Over to you, Cyrus, with some Antra and Purview thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Just a small comment. Something you keep sharing, Richard, I think is good for the audience, is when you talk with Gen AI or in general agentic AI to develop your MVP, your code, your application, be extremely patient. I know it sounds obvious, but more they're becoming intelligent, more your patience, I mean, that's what I noticed for me, decrease, and your standard increase. So you don't accept stupid failure, like the one you shared with us about, like multiple time missing the context. So that's something I also, because stupidly I work after business hours with Bob, and I just love the tool. And it's the same as GitHub Copilot. And because it's doing greater, I become less tolerant to stupid failure. So anyway.
Yeah, you are right. And I think that I think you and David are going to get the privilege of me giving a sort of internal, hey, this is what I've been doing with GitHub Copilot session on Monday. So you'll get some of this anyway. But I think patience is key. There are other things. I think contextual awareness is really important. Understanding what you're trying to actually achieve is really important as well. I think you have to have an underlying understanding of the technology involved. I don't think you can just go and say, go and create me something and then not understand what it's actually created and how it's got to that piece. And the specs, and I think the spec-driven development is going to be very, very key. And I know that's already becoming a buzzword and a sort of a key sort of working around that. But I think that's really going to be a big difference. But patience is key because you have to try multiple times sometimes. It not forgets, but it sometimes loses some information that you might have said to it half an hour ago and that you haven't documented yet. So you have to be very patient with it and go, okay, right, it didn't work that time. Let me retweak my prompt a little bit. Still not quite right. Retweak until you finally get to where you need to be. And I certainly know some people that after the second or third time would go, I'm not going to continue with this. I'm going to go and do something else, or do a different approach to it. But anyway, yes. Now I've digressed completely, but you're absolutely right, Cyrus. I think that is a key skill that we should maintain.
It's the main skill. No, it's the main skill. As I'm happy you said that the people give up. I've seen that a lot. So if you push and you become patient, it always works at some point. I've never had any project or anything I wanted to do that didn't work with a Gen AI. Okay, sorry, something digression. So
yeah. However, that is one reason why I stopped being a developer, is because I would get stuck on a problem and I would work on it until it was fixed, no matter how long that took or how late into the night I was working on it or into the early mornings. So I actually had to stop that because that was a bad behavior.
Actually, I think it's a very good behavior. I think you're a good developer if you have this mindset. So, I mean, we're going into a new sub-digression of the digression now.
Yeah. I wasn't a good developer. I was just a stubborn developer. I think there's a big difference.
I have the same. I have this thing that it needs to work. Otherwise, I will dream about it. I will think about it until I see it working. It will be an open tab in my head. Okay, so we talked about AI a lot, and for this year, as Richard introduced, for this year I'm going to focus more on, less on device security and stopping the malware, all this cool stuff I always liked. I'm going to focus on two things: Purview and Antra. Why? Because for the security in depth architecture, we know we have the security, all the layers. And the first layer, we always talk about it, is the identity. And this is beyond important today with the agentic AI. They all have an identity. And it was a bit abstract for me. So now I'm going to focus on Antra, especially for AI. It's going to burn my neurons. And the last layer is, of course, the crown jewels, is the data itself. So the Purview for that is really interesting. And Purview become like Antra. They changed the name. It was the Azure Active Directory. And Purview was compliance, .microsoft.com. It was a set of different tools. And now they try to change the name to change the mindset. And I've never really, I repeated what I was seeing online. I was learning more and more. But it's this keep adding things to those two technology. And it's impressive how it's not a set of tools anymore. It's like just a mindset. So I'm going to explain more. But yeah, the discussion we had today with David and Richard proved that actually this is extremely important to focus on AI security. It's going to be the main threat. IBM shared a report. Every year they do the cost of data breach, if I'm correct. And I forgot the name of the guy. I watch all the time from IBM. He's on the YouTube, IBM Technology, and he share every year the threat for the next year. And he talked about shadow AI and stuff. So if you see, this is the thing that Purview can handle perfectly. Okay, so data security for me is moving from, as I said, separate tools to one posture-driven approach. And that's exactly what Microsoft Purview Data Security Posture Management, so DSPM, is becoming. And we discussed before, I think during or before joining that podcast, about there was not a lot of news since the Christmas and now the early years. But luckily, I've seen some December update and January update for Purview, and one of them is the new DSPM experience. So I got fooled. I was like, okay, there's a new dashboard, there's a new UI, but that's not important. The important is the mindset shift. So if you play with it a bit more, you see that the DSPM is no longer just a dashboard. It's more like an outcome cards. So you pick a goal and then you work on it. For example, reducing oversharing or hardening risky data paths. And it brings together signals, the controls, and the remediation step in one place. So I've shared that before, but it's even more obvious today. If you just start to play with it, if you have a demo environment, or if you have a real environment, even better, you can see that you can quickly solve those objectives, those goals. And it also pushes for posture reporting. So you can track the progress over time instead of living in today's alert. Label coverage, policy coverage, risk trends, and what actually improved. I put myself a note here. I wanted to share it with the audience here. That's new. DSPM also connects with data security investigations. And from December 2025, Purview introduced data risk graphs as generally available, and it's in investigation. And that also, as I understood, integrates now with Sentinel. So it's you instead of seeing just alerts on Purview and then you go on Purview to detect. Now from Sentinel, normally you should see it's still in preview for that thing, but you can visualize relationships between impacted assets, users, and activities instead of again reading flat list of alerts. So they all interconnect those news, and we know Purview, and for other projects I had with IBM, and even question I'm asked, and it's also the way I think. I'm not saying that with a snob or arrogance, but it's just like Purview. Also, if you read the marketing of Microsoft, it's sold like a you just set up on and it's going to work. No, the SITs, for example, the labels, nothing is re-automated. What comes out of the box, I've personally never seen them working. You always need to customize everything with Purview. So it's always it feels like a lot of work in progress. That's why I didn't really liked personally to focus on Purview before, because you don't have this feeling of you have the policy set, it's tested, it works. No, it's a constant improvement. And for that, I think a few weeks ago, it was David when you talked about observability. So that's a big part of DSPM story is AI observability. You have like Purview now is increasingly designed to show you what AI apps and AI agents are being used, what they interact with, or what are the sensitive data involved in those interactions. And yeah, so because we're in the AI world, it's not, as I said, do you have a policy? It's more like, is the policy actually work at scale? Are you sure it's going to work at scale, etc.? So the last thing with this DSPM is now it's open to integrate with third-party signals better than before. So have a look if you are involved in that. And another strong signal I've seen from those news is the data security investigations. It's becoming a core part of Microsoft Purview narrative. Why? So I was seeing that they now you have like they replaced the compute. So they have implemented compute units to replace the previous security compute units models for capacity billing. So when I see billing, usually I personally don't like talking about billing or licensing. I like, but billing is a bit boring. But that's not why I'm sharing that, because when you talk about billing on these new models, you can see that now it's not a side feature. It's becoming foundational. It's becoming a core part of Purview. And this news also, I think I misread, but it's for me it's bigger than it looks. So classification and labeling is the core of Purview, but the very practical improvement from December again is auto labeling policies now support nested rule logic. So if you played with Purview and you try to you think in a certain way, you get immediately stuck by the limitation of what you can do. So you have to relearn, and it's often the case with Microsoft. You have to think like Microsoft and the way they implemented the tool, and that's why you always have often you have like a configuration drift, because people think differently naturally than the way Microsoft designed things. And it's is the weakness of Microsoft since a long time, but I know they work on that. From the CCP at least, I see they recruited specific UI UX experts to work on that. And I think this is one of the fruit of those experts, because now you can include and, or, and then not conditions in those nested groups. So that, as a developer, it sounds obvious, but now it's just implemented. So I didn't test it yet, but you can do so many things, I'm sure, from now. And last thing with Purview, and that's from previous news, but is a compliance. So because AI governance without compliance, we know is just vibes. So now there's a new shift in the compliance manager. Microsoft added integration with Azure AI Foundry to automate compliance evaluation for AI models and agents. The idea is simpler. So the idea is simple. Compliance checks should not be a one-time spreadsheet exercise. They should connect to how AI systems are actually built and evaluated. We are a Microsoft partner. We know that every year we are evaluated on certain things, and you still have today a lot of manual check, for a lot of things we do. Even some, if you've seen how ISO 27K1 and some other auditors, they still come with spreadsheets, and I've even seen people with paper. There's a lot of things. To the AI world, it's a bit different because not only the regulation changed so fast, but the way you can prove and that you have control, you can't just rely on only on spreadsheet. So now, from what I see, evaluation like EU, I don't know how it's. I just discovered the name. EU AI Act. I know I should have learned about this one, and the NIST AI RMF. Those ones work really well now with Purview. So now from the Microsoft promise, compliance is moving closer to the AI lifecycle. And that's exactly what we need. You can't just rely just on spreadsheets. So more on that later when I'm practicing. And a small news about compliance, communication compliance. There's a word compliance, but it's not. Oh, sorry, you raised your hand, Richard.
No, I was just saying that we have a very hard constraint for today's recording. So we will pick that one up in the next episode.
Yeah.
So on that note, and I've said that about 3 or 4 times today, so I need to come up with another phrase to use in this scenario. Thank you all for watching, listening, whatever medium you're doing this on. And again, if you've got to this point in the video or the audio, please like, follow, subscribe, whatever, again, mechanism is applicable for your platform. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Look forward to it. Anything from David and Cyrus just before we wrap up?
Yeah, next episode I will continue on the Antra. There's two interesting news. So please watch the next episode. It will be a direct continuation of this one.
Excellent. In which case, thank you very much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.